Welcome to the Zero Lab podcast. I'm your host, Tom Hellkamp, here with my co-host, Austin Swain.
Hey.
And Max Johnson.
Hey, Tom. How's it going?
Good. How you guys doing?
Doing well.
Today, we're going to be talking about the new Japanese set, Snow Hazard and Clayburst. We're going to be talking about Scarlet and Violet pre-releases, which are happening this weekend. And then we're going to be talking about Charlotte Regionals, which we will not be attending, but Max is attending. And we're going to talk about the deck he's going to bring to a top 8 finish at the very least in Charlotte.
That's right.
So for Snow Hazard and Clayburst, the new sets revealed from Japan. Max and I have seen these cards, but Austin is not privy to what they do yet.
No, I'm a little bit behind, which is all right. I took a couple months break. I realized I wasn't going to be able to go to any of the upcoming regionals, and I lost heart.
Well, you're back now, and you're ready to hear about.
That's right.
The set that saves the Pokemon TCG, as some people have called it.
I have also heard that, and I am inclined to believe you.
Well, we're going to start with what will be no one else's favorite card but yours from the reveals. Many do not know that Austin Swain is the only person to finish in the top 64 of the 2022 Indianapolis Regional Championships with a Magma Basin deck.
The Busted Basin.
So Austin is a very big fan of the Busted Magma Basin.
I am.
And this card goes along with it quite well. Do you know who Chi Yu is?
So I believe it's one of the new legendaries, right?
Chi Yu is one of the new ruinous Pokemon legendaries from Scarlet and Violet, and it is a goldfish.
The beads of ruin.
The beads of ruin.
That's right.
This is Chi Yu.
Okay, I didn't realize that was the fire one.
It's the fire one.
Interesting.
So, for 1 fire energy, it has Burning Envy, which is discard 2 cards from the top of your opponent's deck. It's very interesting. But its second attack for 2 fire energy, so able to be powered up turn 1 with a Magma Basin. Flame Surge, 100 damage. Choose up to 3 of your benched Pokemon. Search your deck for a basic fire energy and attach 1 to each of those Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. One interesting thing about that is it doesn't have to be fire Pokemon you attach it to.
That is very interesting. So, yeah, that is interesting. One of the things I want to test a little bit is kind of a little bit of Zorobox with fire. So that is interesting. Well, I guess that wouldn't matter anyway, because Zoroark completely discards everything. So just kidding.
Yeah, but a cool card nonetheless. Unfortunately, though, for Austin, is we were talking about fire decks, and you said fire kind of has its time to shine now because Palkia was so good, and fire was having a tough time with Palkia being good. But now that we have Miraidon, an electric deck that's going to be tier 1 probably, that should get rid of a lot of the water decks in the format. Well, the bad news is that there's another type in the TCG that is represented by the water type, and that is ice, which is not weak to lightning. And we do have some new ice type Pokemon represented by water type in the TCG that are going to be really good, and that is the Frigibax, Arctibax, and Baxcalibur lines from, I believe it is the Snow Hazard set.
Yeah, those were some of my favorite. The Baxcalibur is definitely one of my favorites from Scarlet.
Oh yeah,
very cool Pokemon.
Very happy to see that it has a good card. And we'll skip kind of the evolution line, but what the Baxcalibur does is it is Rain Dance. So its ability absolute 0 as often as you like during your turn. You may attach a basic water energy card from your hand to one of your Pokemon.
And for those who might be new to the Pokemon trading card game, this is an ability that's been reprinted several times over the years, beginning all the way back in base set on the base set Blastoise. And it's always been, pretty good. Like, it's seen play throughout the years. But I think that now in this format, we have a card that really enables like that line to be played, because most stage 2s, it's hard to get out of stage 2 reliably, but water has access to Irida, so you're able to easily grab whatever the Baxcalibur plus the rare candy and get set up on and start attaching energies pretty quick.
Yeah, so really easy way to power this up, really easy way to get the stage 2 into play. And there's a lot of good ways to get energy into your hand. Obviously, we have things like Energy Search. You can grab the energy, but also reprinted recently was the Superior Energy Retrieval, which if you discard 2 cards from your hand, you can grab 4 basic water energies from the discard pile. So by discarding all those energy with Radiant Greninja to draw more cards, and then you can get them back with the Superior Energy Retrieval and then attach them to anything with Baxcalibur. The interesting thing with Baxcalibur too is it's not limited to attaching to water Pokemon. And so one of the things you and I talked about, obviously, there's going to be another card we'll talk about that is obviously going to be paired with the Baxcalibur. But Gudra is an interesting idea. The Hisuian Gudra V-Star is attacks for water, metal, colorless. So 2 of those energy can be attached by Baxcalibur. So you could turn Gudra into sort of a Cheryl deck and not as much of a Lost Zone deck.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty cool way to play it. Right now, Gudra just relies on the Mirage Gate, so this is an alternative way to play it. Something that's also pretty cool, I think, about the Baxcalibur is that it has 160 HP. Frostmoth, most notably, which has just rotated, had a similar ability that was only to bench. But I think it having such low HP made it a really prime target for Moonlight Shurikens and Lost Mines. So it was kind of hard to justify benching it. But
absolutely.
There's a lot more safety in the Baxcalibur.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think being able to attach the active is huge too.
Yeah, that's a huge change. Very good
really
change.
Good. So the card that's obviously going to be paired with this is the Chien Pao EX, which is another one of the ruinous Pokemon. Kind of have a theme going here. That is the Sword of Ruin. Sword of Ruin. It's kind of like a saber-toothed tiger, and it's got that ability is Trembling Cold. So once during your turn, if this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, you just search your deck for 2 basic water energy, put them into your hand. Very obvious synergy with the Baxcalibur.
Yeah. Free Capacious Bucket.
Free Capacious Bucket,
which has rotated.
And you can use multiple in a turn, right? If you have 2 Chien Pao down, you can use one, switch out of the active, use another one. There's 4 energy in your hands, which is very good with Chien Pao's attack because its attack, Hail Blizzard, is 2 water energy, but it does 60 times the amount of water energy you discard from all of your Pokemon. So you can discard any amount of water energy from all of your Pokemon, and it does 60 times that. So it's a little bit like Blacephalon GX from Lost Thunder, but instead of lost zoning those energy, they just go into your discard pile, and you can get those back with Superior Energy Retrieval and things like that.
Yeah, and I think something to note too is I think the 60 damage multiplier is a much better number just in this format. That's, you get rid of 4 energy. That's KOing any basic EX Pokemon, basically every basic V Pokemon, I think too, and you can start pushing some numbers even just with 4, up to 270 with Choice Belt or the
Muscle Band?
The Defiance Band.
Defiance Band, yeah. I was trying to remember it, the new one that came out in the Scarlet Violet base set. So
and once you have that Baxcalibur out, I think it's very easy to just repeatedly attach 5 energy because you can get, or 6 to do 360. Because you have the Superior Energy Retrieval that will get you 4, and then you have the Chien Pao's ability that'll get you 2 more from your deck. It just depends on how much water energy you're able to play in the deck. Obviously, you're going to need to play upwards of like 12 or more.
Another cool idea for the deck that I saw on Twitter was playing Skaters Park as your stadium, which would allow you to use the ability on the first Chien Pao, attach them, retreat, those energy go back to your hand, and then you can use the second Chien Pao's ability. So that's an easy way to get 4 energy into your hand without having to rely on a switching card.
Yeah, and then there's the cool thing about the deck, I think, that will make any deck good in the current format is the ability to swing hard with single prizers or 2 prizers and that sort of thing. So a couple cards that come to mind with the water energy would be the Wishy Washy from, I believe, Battle Styles or Evolving Skies.
Yeah, the Rapid Strike one.
And it has 30 HP, but if it has 3 water energy attached to it, you get plus 150. And then it does 30 damage for each water energy attached to it. I think it's 30 plus 30.
I think so.
Something
I think that sounds
right. So you can swing pretty hard with that, attaching a lot of water energy to it. It turns into kind of a high HP basic 1 prize Pokemon. There's a couple other things you could swing with, like I believe there's a Kyurem, a dragon type Kyurem, that I think is like water, metal for its attack cost. But that does a lot. I think it has kind of the same damage multiplier as Chien-Pao.
It's 60 for each water you discard.
Yeah. So there's a lot of good one prizers you can bring into the deck. You also have the Radiant Greninja, which already has obvious synergy. Like you brought up the Irida. Irida's a great supporter card. You also have Palkia V-Star to just pop that ability and attach more water energy, as well as being a good attacker on its own.
Yeah, you have access to Nessa, which is just like a better Clara
Nessa
for water
rotates.
decks. Nessa rotates.
Nessa rotates.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah.
And there's a Kyogre in Silver Tempest, which I think could be maybe an interesting card. It's 4 energy, I believe,
Yeah, I think
and
so.
it does 180 to anything, and then the energies go back into your hand. So could be
I like that a
pretty
lot.
interesting.
That's cool.
That is really cool.
It's always nice to have like a bench sniper because it forces your opponent to put down a mana fee. If they don't have the mana fee, there might be something on their bench that they want to protect, and you can just snipe that pretty easily.
And something that I think is also super cool about is that a lot of times those attacks like are limited to the bench, but you can also choose to attack the active too if you want to, which is kind of nice to have that flexibility.
Yeah.
Well, moving on from the Chien-Pao, we do have another card here, a single prizer, just kind of interesting. Just wanted to note this. It's the Rabsca. So it's a psychic type, stage 1 with 70 HP, and its first attack for a colorless energy is Revival Blessing. And you can choose a Pokemon from your discard pile and put it onto your bench. And that's any Pokemon. Stage 1, Stage 2, Basic, EX, VMAX, V-Star, V, whatever. That can just come out of the discard pile onto your bench without having to evolve. I think more of this will probably be utilized in some control decks. It's a little bit slow to be used in an attacking style deck, but it could be used if there's a good stage 2 for control. I think there's an Ursaluna from maybe Lost Origin or Astral Radiance, something like that. That was a good control card, but being a stage 2 was difficult to get into play, and maybe Rabsca can make that more usable.
Yeah, I think definitely that card is gonna. I think if it ever sees any play, it'll be with a stage 2. It won't be anything with like a VMAX or anything like that. Just because Radiant Eternatus exists, and that's usually, I would say that's a better way to get VMAXs onto your board, cheating them out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I agree. I think, especially since it's just a single colorless attack, being able to utilize that to get some of those trickier stage 2 Pokemon into play will be great. And I think controlless will definitely have to think about including this card because there are a lot of really strong stage 2 Pokemon that have incredible abilities that can either lock your opponent out of certain aspects of the game or just make things way more smoothly for your own setup.
Yeah.
That before were a little bit of a challenge to try and set up. You'd have to rely on being able to use Zoroark to transform into the stage 1 and then manually evolve into stage 2. And some of that could feel kind of awkward.
Rare candies, it's always hard to fit rare candies into a deck.
Right. Seems like this card could potentially fill some of that slot.
Yeah, absolutely. The next card is Ting Lu EX. So this is sort of the counterpart to Chien-Pao, but it's on the Clayburst side of the Japanese set. And Ting Lu is the Ruinous Chalice.
The Chalice of Ruin or the Bowl of Ruin?
It's a ruinous Pokemon.
He's got a cup on his head.
There's a real theme going on here with all the ruinous Pokemon. But it's got a cool ability, which is Cursed Ground. If this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, your opponent's Pokemon with damage counters on them have no abilities, excluding Pokemon EX. So the first thing your mind goes to is there's the new Hawlucha from Scarlet and Violet that can put 1 damage counter on 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So against something like Lugia, you can turn off their Archeops with Ting Lu. You could turn off Comfeys, Cramorants, Radiant Greninjas, anything that's not an EX, really. Genesects, you can shut off with Ting Lu. A lot of different Pokemon that could get really hurt by this. Now, Ting Lu has an attack for 3 fighting energy. It does 150, and then you also put 2 damage counters onto one of your opponent's Pokemon. So I think that's a difficult attack to power up, but probably with this sort of deck, you're either relying on a hit and run strategy, and there's a few good hit and run attackers in the format, or you're hoping that the ability lock is doing enough that it gives you time to power up this sort of attack.
Sure.
Yeah, I think for me, some cards that come to mind that could potentially be paired with it are the Radiant Blastoise, which has not seen much play at all since Greninja is just typically a better Radiant Pokemon that fulfills that slot overall. there's the Inteleon VMAX, which has its ability that lets you place 2 damage counters on 2 Pokemon.
Yeah, 2 Pokemon. Yep.
And then there is Gapejaw Bog, which could be a good way to spread some damage counters to your opponent's Pokemon, shut off their abilities.
Yeah. And
I especially like the Gapejaw Bog potential because that immediately activates, and so your opponent can't utilize any basic Pokemon's effect or anything that then evolves from a Pokemon that was put into play with Gapejaw Bog active. I think that's really interesting.
That's kind of makes me think of a ruling like if you have Gapejaw Bog in play and you play something like a Lumineon, does it stop the Lumineon's effect from activating?
Something to think about. Abilities is if this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, your opponent's Pokemon with damage counters on them have no abilities.
I would imagine yes.
So Lumineon's ability is when you put this from your hand onto your bench, you may search your deck for. So that's interesting because something like Weezing says it shuts off the abilities of your opponent's Pokemon in play and in their hand, right? There's some that say like the abilities in your hand because the Lumineon comes from the hand onto the bench, so technically isn't in play. But that would be an interesting ruling. I don't know.
I'd have to talk to a judge on that and see.
Yeah, that would suck if you couldn't play a Lumineon under Gapejaw Bog against Tinglu.
Honestly, I hope that's what it is. Personally,
cool.
I think that would make the game more interesting.
But then hit and run style attackers with Tinglu. I think there's a Hisuian Lilligant that for 2 colorless energy, it does 20 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon and then retreats to the bench. So you could place all the damage counters with the Hisuian Lilligant and then bring the Tinglu active. I think Rapid Strike Urshifu V is a hit and run attack for 30, but the whole point is doing the ability lock, I guess. So it depends.
Yeah.
And then this is kind of out there, but there's also the Shiftry from Lost Origins, which does 210 for 1 grass, and then you put all the cards in the Lost Zone, so you can just swap out that.
So you just Lost Zone it, and then you have to bring up a new active.
Yeah,
that's cool. That's funny. So that's Tinglu. I think that's going to be an interesting card. The funny thing is, it's like ability locking, but its ability lock is shut off by Path to the Peak.
Right. That is interesting.
So that could be an interesting card. And then we were talking earlier today at our Scarlet and Violet pre-release, and a little bit of a meme, but we were telling Austin that there's a chance the Picnic Basket could see play. I think it's called Picnic Basket, which heals 20 damage from all Pokemon on the field.
So both yours and your opponents.
Both yours and your opponents. And the reason we were saying that was Tinglu shut off your abilities, you heal the damage off of your Pokemon, now you can use your abilities again. I hope we don't live in a world where Tinglu is so oppressive that we have to play Picnic Baskets.
Right.
But if we are, I hope that world also exists where Hisuian Zoroark V-Star is good, because you Picnic Basket a Hisuian Zoroark V-Star deck, and now they have no damage.
Right.
And they can't really attack anymore. So.
Picnic Basket could be an exact one of include in decks that play Irida, maybe.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny how if Tinglu's good, there's a lot of counters out there to basic abilities, because we have Klefki that's turn off basic abilities. Tinglu. Right.
The
Empoleon, which for non-rule box Pokemon. So I don't know. Mew Genesect thought it was going to be one of those better decks going into post rotation because it kept a lot of its cards. But you also still have Drapion, and now if there's cards shutting off its Genesect abilities to draw, I think Mew is really hurt by that. As well as other things like Lost Box can be hurt by Tinglu and Klefki and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Moving on, we have Dunsparce, which, as you may have guessed, is an evolution to Dunsparce.
What a lad.
And it is a Dunsparce with one more segment.
Okay.
One more little
it's
belly.
Not the triple segment?
It is not the triple segment Dunsparce, unfortunately, on this card. But what Dunsparce does, for 4 colorless energy, it does 100 damage, and your opponent's active Pokemon is auto-paralyzed. And then you shuffle the Dunsparce and all cards attached to it back into your deck.
Okay.
So what deck are you playing a Dunsparce in?
Well, I feel like the 4 energy attachment is very unfortunate. So that's hard to power up. And it's on a stage 1. Mm-hmm. So, just off the top of my head, I think that if you were to play it, you would have to play it with something that accelerates energy, such as the Baxcalibur. You have Cherim from Battle Styles that accelerates grass energies.
Lugia.
You could throw it in a Lugia deck. Could power it up with the Lugia.
Yeah.
With the archetypes.
I think the reason that the Dunsparce caught people's eyes, there was like an Excavalier or something from maybe the Black and White era. I can't remember exactly what year. That had essentially the same attack and had done really well at Worlds or something.
And I believe that it was a different special condition. I think it was something else. But the Dunsparce's Paralysis, which is definitely the best special condition in the trading card game.
I think the thing to mention about Paralysis in this format is there's a lot of switching cards.
There's
true.
Escape
Rope, Switch, and specifically the Lost Box decks are playing a lot of switching cards. But I think you even see those in like a Miraidon deck because Miraidon can't attack the next turn. Right. So they need to be able to switch in and out and do those sorts of things.
And just one more note on the Dunsparce. I know that when Diamond and Pearl, the games came out and they started coming out with all these different evolutions for pre-existing Pokemon. I know there was a lot of fan art going around on the internet of what a potential Dunsparce evolution could look like, with like these epic dragons or like crazy like Hydras or something like that.
Right.
And then they finally gave it to us years later, and it is Dunsparce plus.
Yeah.
Right. Is it possible that Dunsparce could be eventually have a additional evolution?
Dunsparce?
Dunsparce.
Yeah,
I don't know. That does become a Hydra. I don't know. I want to live in a world where that's real.
Segment the Dunsparce.
I want to see Dunsparce Hydra. That's what I want.
Well, moving on, we have the next card, and we have a Dedenne GX Spiritual reprint. How do you feel about that?
I don't know. Dedenne GX was a very strong card. Some would maybe say it was too good.
Yeah.
I feel kind of middle of the road of it. I think that having a Pokemon effect that is discard draw is inherently powerful, and we'll see. I'm curious to hear more about it.
Yeah, there are some limitations on it this time. But before we get into what it actually does, these types of cards, the Lumineon Vs, the Crobat Vs, the Shaman EXs, the Dedenne GXs, the Tapu Lele GXs, they're usually given to like a basic Pokemon, just a basic Pokemon for the region or a legendary. Right. So from Scarlet and Violet, from the Paldea region, who would you give this style of card to?
I mean, my gut instinct is I would really like it to be something like Lechonk, but I'm guessing it's not Lechonk.
It's not Lechonk. Who would you give it to? You already know, but who would you give it to?
I think it could be kind of, I think a cool Veluza card. I think that was a kind of a
Veluza,
kind of a cool
Pokemon.
Speedy Pokemon kind of fits thematically.
Yeah, I was going to say something like Tatsugiri maybe. But
I like Tatsugiri.
That's personal preference. Maybe one of the Paradox Pokemon.
Could be cool.
Paradox Suicune would be cool. What was that called?
Walking Wake.
Yeah. What a cool Pokemon.
Yeah. I was excited about that. Anyway, no, it was Squawkabilly.
The Bruno Mars of the Pokemon world.
Squawkabilly EX.
What a boring Pokemon.
A colorless Pokemon with 160 HP. Its ability Lively Draw. On your first turn of the game, you may discard your hand and draw 6 cards. You can't use more than one Lively Draw ability during your turn.
And so it's only on your first turn?
It's only on your first turn, but it's not when you place it from your hand onto your bench. So you can nest ball it into play. You choose when you use the ability. And then it just sits there for the rest of the game. But it can be used on the first turn. I think one of the interesting things about it is I think generally it's accepted that the first turn going first, no supporter rule is a good thing for the game. But with decks like Lost Box around where you can get donked by a Cramorant, it's nice to have a little bit of additional draw in that opening hand going first to be able to set up a little bit more. Sure. To maybe find those Battle VIP passes that you need, to find more Nest Balls, Ultra Balls, whatever it is. And Squawkabilly EX, I think, is a good way to do that, despite the fact that they gave it to something like Squawkabilly.
Yeah, it just reminds me of the birds from Mario Sunshine. That's all I can think of.
Yeah.
I think that the fact that it's not from hand, I think I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I think that's really great.
Especially with losing Quick Ball.
With losing Quick Ball, especially. Exactly, yes. Yeah. So Nest Ball can get it, you can use it, and that could kind of help with kind of like your sequencing on like what you're going to do before you discard your hand. can kind of maybe make some of the decisions a little bit easier. I could definitely see this card being included in a lot of lists.
Well, the funny thing is you can start the Squawkabilly in your active spot as
That's
your first
true.
Pokemon.
Right, without consequence, because
like when you start
still use
Lumineon, it feels so bad.
Feels
You're like,
so
now I don't
bad.
even get to use the ability, and I have this liability in play.
Right.
With Squawkabilly, you're like, I started it, that's fine. And interestingly, Squawkabilly actually has kind of a utility attack. If you were to start it, go second for a colorless energy, does 20 damage, and you can search your discard pile for 2 energy and attach them to one of your Pokemon. Basic energy. So it's a useful card, and I think it'll see a lot of play.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So the next card we have here is a card I think you'll be specifically excited about. Austin is our resident Reggie enthusiast, and Reggie recently lost a card near and dear to his heart, which would be the Ordinary Rod, despite also losing all of the energy it uses.
Right,
but it also lost.
But we don't think about that.
We don't need to talk about that.
I don't like to think about that.
But it did lose Ordinary Rod, which was a big blow to the deck, being able to recycle those Reggies that you want to use.
Right.
But now we have a new reprint, which is Super Rod. So shuffle 3 and any combination of Pokemon and basic energy cards from your discard pile back into your deck.
That's right.
So a nice item-based Pokemon recycler that I think will be really good for Reggies. I think the only item-based Pokemon recovery that we had was Rescue Carrier, which was only for 90 HP and less Pokemon. Otherwise, we had Clara and Miriam, which are great supporter cards, but not necessarily what you want to play in Reggies.
Right. Definitely want to be able to rely on an item card for those things more so. And I don't know. I think Super Rod is great. Max and I, we played back during the Diamond and Pearl era, and back then we had Night Maintenance, which was this exact same effect.
Yeah.
It was an amazing card. You saw it at least one, sometimes two, in just about every deck. So it's a great card.
I also think you see post rotation. I think some Giratina B-Star decks are playing Energy Recycler, which is good, but they would prefer to be playing Ordinary Rod to be able to recycle Sableye, to be able to recycle Manaphy's and Cramorants and some energy, and now they can sort of do that again with Super Rod.
Yeah, as a Goodra player, I know that looking at what the deck looks like post rotation, Ordinary Rod was, for me, I felt like the biggest hit of the deck, other than Scoop Up Net.
Yeah.
And so I was really excited to see that card because it is sorely needed. I was very excited to get some good item recovery back.
Definitely. Good card.
Good card. So the next card we have is Charm of Courage, which is essentially a reprint of Cape of Toughness. So any basic Pokemon you attach it to gets plus 50 HP. I think obviously going to see play with decks like maybe Blissey, Miltank. Could be seen in several other decks, but I know there's a card you're excited to use it with. Max, tell us about that.
Yeah, so in post-rotation world, we have Gardevoir EX seeing some play right now overseas. Mm-hmm. And I know that some people were looking at the Drifloon that came out in Scarlet and Violet base set as a potential include. Looking at the card without knowledge of these new sets, the Drifloon does not look that good because it has 70 HP and it has an attack that for 2 psychic energy, you can do 30 damage for each damage counter on the Drifloon. So with with Gardevoir EX powering it up, it can do 180 damage, which is probably not enough to be an include because it's an easy knockout after that. However, with the inclusion of Charm of Courage, it has 120 HP, so Gardevoir EX can make it go to 100 damage or 100 damage on it, so 300 damage for the attack. And with something
that's pretty good on a Drifloon.
That's something to talk about
for a one prizer, 300 on a one prizer, and
that's only a 5 energy investment onto it too, which is kind of crazy.
Well, and you don't care if the energy's discarded when it gets knocked out.
You just put it back on something.
No, it comes back anyway.
Yeah, and if you play something like Damage Pump or something along those lines, you're able to, and move 1 extra damage counter onto it, then you're hitting for 330, which is knocking out everything but like 1 card in the format.
That's crazy.
If a month ago or 2 months ago, someone would have said, hey, remember Charizard VMAX, how it hits for 300 for 5?
There's a Drifloon
that's going to do that on a just like basic Pokemon that's not even a multi-prize Pokemon. I would have laughed, and I'm still laughing because it's just hard to even fathom.
And I my first thought on that was like against something like Sableye or Cramorant, something that could play Lost Vacuum to discard that tool. The Drifloon is tough because it's got such low HP that they can discard the tool. The Drifloon then knocks out itself. Your opponent takes a prize, and then they knock out something else. But you just don't bench the Drifloon against those sorts of decks.
Yeah.
The Drifloon is for decks that have these massive HP Pokemon that you just need to totally nuke. Like imagine
That you can
UV Max.
dumpster.
Like you just do 330 on a UV Max with a Drifloon. Fun times.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's
No more
easily
Drapion
included in
Vs
every
and a
Gardevoir
Gardevoir
deck.
EX.
Yeah.
You just need Drifloon.
That's unbelievable. I'm stoked about it.
Now, that's pretty cool. The next card we have to talk about, we got 2 left here. The next card, we're getting into the supporters revealed. So we have Grusha, the ice type gym leader from Paldea, the snowboarder, and their supporter is draw cards until you have 5 cards in your hand. If you have no energy cards attached to any of your Pokemon, draw up to 7 cards instead.
So at first glance, there's not that many cards in the format that want to play 0 energy or can play 0 energy have 0 energy on your field. There's Hisuian Electrode V and Hisuian Arcanine, which can attack for 0 energy, but both of those cards aren't really seeing much play right now.
The Hisuian Arcanine is a cool point. I didn't think about that. A fighting type, so it could hit weakness on Miraidons and stuff. If there's ever a point where there's not like a dominant single prize deck, I could see Hisuian Arcanine kind of filling that void.
Yeah, unfortunately, right now both those decks are kind of gate kept by Lost Box, but that could change in the future for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so far I'd say Grusha not going to be see much play.
Well, and it's interesting too because it's draw up to 7 if you have no energy in play, which is kind of not a good condition to have to meet. But you have cards like Cynthia's Ambition, which have the same base draw as Grusha, draw up to 5. But then if something was knocked out last turn, you drop to 8 instead of 7, and that's just better. So I don't think Grusha is going to find a spot in the format.
Right.
Really.
I would agree with that. I think it's a very forgettable card.
Yeah. The last card, however, not forgettable. The last card is the savior of the Pokemon TCG. It is the reason that people are excited to play the game again. It is the reason that it seems like a lot of people on Twitter are alive today, and that is Iono, the supporter card of the 3rd gym leader from the Scarlet and Violet games.
The electric type gym leader.
Electric type gym leader, the Twitch streamer gym leader, which
Twitch TikTok streamer.
Yeah. My least favorite character, but I think this card is appropriate for an annoying character, personally. Each player shuffles their hand and puts it on the bottom of their deck. Then each player draws a card for each of their remaining prize cards. So it is Marnie and N combined.
That's fantastic. These are I'm so excited about this because I feel like this game, Roxanne tried to fill this void.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it was just too niche of a card. Oftentimes, you would not find it in the right times. Whenever I would try to access Roxanne, it was always either already discarded or I just couldn't find it in the deck.
Well,
and
just think about the decks playing Roxanne, right? Like
right.
Mew plays Roxanne, some Lost Box decks play Roxanne, Gudra plays Roxanne, but not every deck plays Roxanne. I think nearly every deck could play a 4 of Iono. Lugia doesn't play Roxanne, which, because there's just not a right time for Lugia to be able to use Roxanne, but Lugia could play an Iono on turn 1 and still have that shuffle draw 6.
Yeah, I think if you're going to build a deck and if the first thing you do is put in 4 Iono, you're probably off to a good start.
Yeah, off the right track.
I would agree. Yeah. I think this card is obviously good. It's obviously going to be seeing an immense amount of play, as it should. And I think we've really desperately, since we're losing Marnie, I think we've needed something that spiritually fills in both kind of that disruption role and consistency role that I think this card is going to play. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I think we were promised comeback mechanics with the new standard when they announced it, and this is a good start. And it's interesting too because I think it brings cards that have kind of fallen to the wayside back into the spotlight. Things like the barrel are going to be really important. Back when N was good, people were playing I think it was like Abyssal Hand or something, Octillery, that did the same thing as Barrel.
Yeah.
So cards like Barrel, cards like Kricketune V, although that's not a very good option.
No.
But cards that can draw your hand back up after getting Ionoed are going to be very... Rev of Room. Well, you're going to have to draw into an energy to do that.
Well, yeah, I suppose that's true.
But Tempting Tune Altaria is another one because you can put a supporter on top of your deck to prepare to be Ionoed. And then because Iono is like a Marnie as well, you don't shuffle that deck, you just draw from the top.
Right.
So there's ways to prepare your deck to be Ionoed. And I think it's a lot of skill expression too, because good players are going to be able to pare down their decks to the point where they're not drawing into worthless cards off of Ionos. It's going to allow for the more skilled players to win more games.
Yeah, I think everyone's looking forward to this card for the most part. And yeah, definitely going to be trying to pick up some of the full arts, maybe, if I hit the lottery.
I think it's going to be the most expensive. Now, okay, so since Scarlet and Violet, we now have gotten rid of the rainbow supporters, and we're into a world where we have full art supporters and alternate full art supporters. And I have to imagine that the alternate full art Iono is going to be one of the most expensive cards in Standard in a very long time.
Yes, I'm certain that you were correct about that.
Because Serena was one of the most expensive female supporter cards in a long time, and I think that settled around $50. I think we could see Iono go way higher than that.
Oh yeah, I could see it being 80 to 100.
Yeah,
easily.
Easy.
Yeah. I mean, time will tell, but
I'm just happy we're not living in the days anymore where Shaman EX had to be 4 of in every deck, and it was like $80.
Yeah,
those were tough times.
Tough times.
Yeah, difficult. I'm glad that's not how things are right now.
Yeah. Well, that's it for Snow Hazard and Clayburst. So those are some of the things we have to look forward to in our June set. So the first time those cards will be playable will be at NAIC, which is exciting. I think we're all probably hoping to be able to attend NAIC this year and to be able to play in this new format with, I think what everyone agrees are balanced and really exciting creative new cards is going to be great.
Yeah. After so many months in the Silver Tempest format, a new format is going to be a breath of fresh air. And it feels like it's, the start of every new format feels so wide open and there's so many possibilities. Yeah. So definitely excited to get into that and explore some of the possible decks we can make.
Yeah. I think the other thing to note about all of the reveals from Scarlet and Violet so far is there's a lot of good, exciting, creative, fun cards, but there's nothing overpowered. There's nothing where you're like, man, that's just too much. Baxcalibur is going to be a good card, but a lot of different decks can use it, right? Whereas Archeops is obviously a good card, but only Lugia can utilize it, and is so overpowered. There's so many things it has access to that it feels so oppressive. And I don't think there's going to be a deck in the Scarlet and Violet era where we're seeing it consistently be 35% of the meta of a day one at a regional. And 50% of the day two. I don't see us falling into that issue so far from what they've revealed in the Scarlet and Violet formats, and I'm excited about that.
Yeah, something I am very much hoping for and looking forward to is it seems like, as you said, like I think that there are going to be less decks that are completely dominant and completely dominating the meta. In recent tournament results, it basically breaks my heart to see like 50% of decks in day two are some, Lugia.
Yeah.
That physically pains me. And I hope that we don't see those kinds of formats. Sometimes I do feel like I need to hold my breath, even as we look at these new cards, because they don't seem like they're going to be completely otherworldly broken, but you
never know.
Sometimes you just never know what people are going to come up with. But I definitely am hoping to see things return a little bit more normal, where the tier 1 decks maybe see 20% meta share in a day 2 setting, and I'm hoping that ends up being the case.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because we saw, I think in like the last 4 formats of the year of like 2022, when we had Brilliant Stars, Astral Radiance, Lost Origin, Silver Tempest, it was like each set brought out what was essentially the counter to the last BDIF. So we had Arceus, then Palkia, then Giratina, and then Lugia kind of trumps them all. And it was this just continuous power creep throughout the year. If we look at this set versus Scarlet and Violet base, let's say the 2 best decks coming out of Scarlet and Violet base set are Gardevoir EX and Miraidon EX. Well, if the 2 best decks coming out of this next set are Tinglu and Champao, they don't seem to be direct counters to either of those, the way that some of the V-Stars seem to be. And I think that's a positive thing for sure.
Absolutely.
I don't see a world where Miraidon can't coexist with Chien-Pao, that sort of thing.
Definitely.
So yeah, moving on from Snow Hazard and Clayburst, let's talk about a little bit of our recent experiences at Scarlet and Violet pre-releases this weekend. Tell us about how you did, the polls you got out of your pre-release kits, some of the things you're excited about for the new cards.
Yeah.
Austin, thanks.
Well, I think to start, everybody likes the silver borders. So
Yeah.
the Pokemon Company, thank you for doing that.
Great move.
It's about time. So thank you. It's great. I love it.
Looking through my deck, seeing just only silver borders was great, but it was also a nightmare knowing that like into the future I'm going to have a mix of yellow and gray borders in my deck.
Yeah. Definitely. It definitely looked beautiful. I also really love the pack changes that you're guaranteed to have a holographic in every pack. The guaranteed having 2 reverse holo slots also is something I'm a huge fan of. I think those are all really excellent changes. I did get a couple of pulls today, nothing crazy, but I was able to pick up, I was able to get the Arcanine EX, a card that I am definitely excited to be testing with Magma Basin.
Oh yeah.
We'll see if it is any good or not. That will be to be determined. But then also I was able to get a Banette EX, which was kind of interesting, bad for a pre-release setting, but interesting card nonetheless. And then also I did get, and I'm forgetting the supporter name, but it's the Shuffle Draw 8. Yeah, Katie. I did get the full art version of Katie, which I did actually use today in one of my battles, which was nice, and it won me the game, interestingly. So yeah, I ended up going 2-1. I got the Dodonzo Reverum package in my pre-release kit, and I felt like it treated me pretty well outside of my game 2, where my starting I think I told you guys, my starting hand was it was Arcanine EX, both of my Reverums, 2 energies, a Dodonzo, and a Professor's Research. And my top deck was the supporter that lets you search for 2 evolutions. And so I drew my starting hand and said, okay, I lose. So that was sad, but
yeah, that's rough. That's a rough hand. That is definitely a pre-release hand right there.
It definitely was. It's like, do I play this Professor's Research and lose, or do I not play Professor's Research and lose?
Well, what about you, Max? Any good pulls?
So I pulled garbage. I pulled basically nothing. I pulled the Toxicroak EX, which is not a good card. Actually, the best pull I had was a pull that I didn't even get, but somebody pulled 2 Gyarados EXs and gave me one because they were like, I have another one, I don't need it. And they didn't want anything for it, but I was like, are you sure? Like, you can take a look through my stack of cards and see if there's anything you want.
Yeah.
And they were like, how about this code card? And I was like, how about 3 code cards? You can have all of those code cards.
How about all of them?
That was nice. I got the Pawmot deck, which was definitely the worst one, I think. And yeah, the Dondozo for sure. I feel like that was the strongest one. That was pretty strong. Yeah. Some guy at our pre-release pulled 5 Tatsugiri. So since the rule of 4 doesn't exist, he just had a busted deck.
Yeah.
I played him. He was my round 2.
Yeah.
It was bad.
Yeah. So not great polls this time around. Hopefully, I'll try to hit up one more event before the pre-releases are over and try to get something else.
Yeah. Nice. I went 3-0. I pulled Spidops EX, Oinkologne EX, and Gardevoir EX. And I pulled the Lechonk and the Tarantula.
So
I was able to play the EXs, and I got the Quackleval pre-release promo. And so I was able to use Quackleval to power up my EXs and just kind of bop everybody. It was a good time. But yes, very excited about the silver borders. It's always fun, pre-release time, just getting to play with the new cards a little bit early and see what crazy pulls you can get and watch all the 6-year-olds get all the good pulls while we pull not very good.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, moving on to our next segment, we'll move on to our Jirachi's Stellar Wish segment where we talk about the cards that are in Standard that we wish were good but are not. So for me personally today, my Stellar Wish is that I wish Lunala from Celebrations was a good card. For 2 colorless energy, Lunala doubles the damage on all of your opponent's Pokemon.
Yeah.
And so if you could combine it with cards like Miss Magius from Silver Tempest, which for a psychic energy puts 2 damage counters on all your opponent's Pokemon, or Hisuian Braviary from Silver Tempest, which for 0 energy puts 3 damage counters on all your opponent's Pokemon that already have damage counters on them, you could use Lunala to double that damage and just wipe their board in a few turns. It doesn't work, unfortunately. And so I wish it worked, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
What's your Stellar Wish, Max?
My Stellar Wish has to be Hisuian Electrode V, which is a fun card. I was super hyped for it when they announced it a little while back. Tried making the deck. It's cool, but unfortunately just gets absolutely bodied by Lost Box and other single prize decks. Pretty fun to hit something for 330 and with using
no
the
energy.
with no energy, using
Yeah.
the Sneasler and stuff. And unfortunately, if the deck was ever going to be good, it would be now while Scoop Up Net's in the format. But since we lose Scoop Up Net, I do not see a future for that deck as of now.
Yeah. For me, it actually is Jirachi V. Interestingly enough, that was a card that I, as soon as I heard what its effect was, I was immediately disappointed because I have always really liked EXP Share as a tool card, and having a, essentially a Pokemon ability version of that card that is easily searchable, I thought was going to be really, really cool.
Yeah.
And it's just really sad to me that it has so many restrictions on it, that it only works, for basic V Pokemon, essentially.
Yeah. And can be shut off by Path.
Yeah. I think that that's a huge, it was a disappointment for me, and I wish it was a better card, and it's just not.
Too many restrictions on it. Maybe if it had been a non-rule box, a few less restrictions, maybe it could have seen play.
Right.
Unfortunately,
it isn't. So that is definitely my Stellar Wish for today.
That's it for our Stellar Wishes for this week. So moving on to Charlotte Regionals. Max, you are attending Charlotte Regionals. I think that everyone knows at this point that the format is mostly solved. Lugia is going to be 30 to 35% on day 1, 50% on day 2. Next is going to be Lost Box, then Mew, Reggie's, Arcdidon, Gudra, some Vikavolt perhaps, and maybe some Control. Those are kind of the top decks right now. So what do you think is going to be happening at Charlotte Regional, and what are you looking to play?
So personally, all the success that I've seen this season has come with the Hisuian Gudra V-Star deck, specifically the Lost Zone variant. I day-two'd Arlington and Orlando. So I would like to play Gudra again. Since those 2 regionals, I've changed the deck up a little bit to hopefully give it a better Lugia matchup. I took out the training courts, which I liked because it provided the deck a lot of consistency, and consistency is definitely a big thing when you're going to a regional playing multiple rounds. You want to make sure you're seeing all of the cards you want to see. However, when I would get to day 2 and face a bunch of Lugias, the deck felt very bad.
Yeah.
So, tried swapping in some temples. It's enough temples can sometimes give Lugia a tough time. The deck has seen some success in some recent regionals, most notably Stefan Ivanov, very good player. This weekend, did very well with the deck. He's top 8 right now?
Right now, it was just the end of day 1 for the Utrecht regionals, and he's finished day 1 8-0-1 with Gudra. So,
pretty good. So I think it can definitely be a strong pick in the format. If I were to not play the Gudra, I would probably hop on the Lugia bandwagon. You can't really go wrong playing the best deck in format. It just, it comes down to how many mirror matches would you like to play?
Yeah, and can you hit heads?
Can you hit heads? Can you go first?
Not heads, but can you go first?
Can you go first?
I always call heads, so I just know I need to hit heads. You're right. You can't go wrong playing the BDIF. Andrew Hedrick won 2 regionals in a row with basically the same 60. Ian Robb just won with Lugia, a very similar list to Andrew Hedrick's. You have 6 Lugias in the top 8 of the last U.S. regional. You can't go wrong with it. You just hope to go first in those mirrors, and even sometimes when you don't, your opponent can misstep. You just got to play the deck the right way. Hope you get your Archeops out turn 2 and go from there. A few interesting things, I think. Andrew Mahone has brought the Mew Pika deck into the format. And I know he was recently talking about how the Mew Pika he felt had a favored matchup into Lugia, and the Pika helped it have a more favored matchup into things like Regis and Lost Box. But after he took a few losses to Lugia, he had about a 50-50 matchup at his last regional with Mew Pika, but felt like there might be a few cards you could even include in that deck to make that Lugia matchup a little bit better. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a few more Mew, as Andrew's kind of been pushing that deck further up into the standings.
Yeah, I think, and also if I had to make a prediction going into Charlotte, I would say that the choice to play 2 Lost Vacuums is going to be a popular one for sure. I think that that's a pretty strong choice. I know some people have been playing that, and some people have been including in the Escape Rope.
Yeah.
I think those are both really strong choices. I think a lot of lists will follow suit.
Yeah. So I think, I think we probably expect to see some Lugias in top 8.
Yeah.
I guess what would be your pick for sort of a non-Lugia deck? What do you hope to see in top 8 this weekend or next weekend at Charlotte?
You guys know my answer. Always going to be Regis. I always hope that there's more Regis on board because I just think it's an amazing deck. And it just keeps getting so close. It keeps getting so close, and it just can't quite, it hasn't quite gotten there yet. And I would really love to see it take down an entire event. So that is definitely my hope. But frankly, I would just be happy if anything
but Lugia.
If anything but Lugia wins, I'm going to be happy.
What about you, Max? Besides Gudra and Lugia, what do you want to see in top 8?
Besides Gudra and Lugia, I would like to see. I wouldn't mind seeing Arcdura. Do well. I think the deck, has a lot of favorable matchups and stuff, and I could definitely see it taking down a tournament. If it hits the right stuff.
Yeah. My hope is Eternatus. I want to see another Eternatus.
Oh
I know we got very close to seeing Eternatus actually win a regional, which if you'd asked me in the Darkness Ablaze format, I would have said, get Eternatus out of here. But nowadays, I'm a big fan. And it would be cool to see that deck maybe take down a regional before it rotates.
Maybe. I don't know if I can advocate for anything with wheezing in it to take anything down.
Yeah. Well, that's fair. That's fair. Well, I think that's everything from us this week on the Zero Lab podcast. Tune in next week, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, take care.
See you next time.